Hello, it's the month's end. I'm Mark Grimshaw, and this is the month's end with Mark Grimshaw. In the news this month, King Charles was diagnosed with cancer. Now look, I'm no fan of the monarchy, but I did think it was really nice when the news was posted to Twitter just how many people came out to show him support during this tough time by offering him my pussy in bio. Really, really hate the fact that there's now a recording of me saying my pussy in bio that anyone can use for whatever nefarious purposes they have. That's all I'm going to say on that subject because I record this a few days before it releases and I'm not taking any chances. Police were called to an immersive Willy Wonka experience in Glasgow due to parents being so angry at the low quality of the £35 attraction. Personally, I was annoyed because they didn't even try to drown my child in a chocolate river. I paid extra for the photo package and the camera didn't even shrink my kid. If I'm honest, the person I feel most sorry for is the child that actually made it all the way to the end, because he now owns the Willy Wonka immersive experience and is having to deal with all of the complaints. Celebrities including Gene Simmons, Helen Mirren and Boy George signed a letter supporting Israel's inclusion in the Eurovision Song Contest. I'll be honest, I was quite surprised to see Boy George's name supporting Israel. He doesn't seem the type to be influenced by the idea of freeing a hostage. Okay, let's have a quick check-up on Decision 2024, United States of Armageddon. Joe Biden's campaign has got off to a great start, winning Democratic primaries in New Hampshire, South Carolina and Nevada. Upon hearing that he won New Hampshire, Joe Biden commented, "New Hampshire, I remember the old one," as he was wheeled away back to the home. As presidents go, Joe Biden reminds me a lot of Abe. Unfortunately, I am talking about Simpson, not Lincoln. The British Academy Film Awards happened on February 19th. A lot of people were surprised to discover Prince William is the president of BAFTA, but I personally can't think of anything more appropriate for the film industry than him having that job because of who his parents are. Now it's time to return to recurring segment, Election 2024, whoever wins, we lose. This month, the Conservative MP Lee Anderson had the whip suspended for Islamophobic comments directed at London Mayor Sadiq Khan. You wouldn't know that, though, if you were only paying attention to BBC News, who for some reason ran with the headline, "MP suspended over criticism of London Mayor." That feels so unnecessarily euphemistic. I don't know, I don't remember the BBC telling us that Osama bin Laden was killed for his involvement in unscheduled demolition works. Do you remember when Matt Hancock lost his job for falling in love? It was really unfortunate on January 6th when there were those scuffles at the Capitol building. Oh, all right, no, fair enough. They did actually do that one. Fair enough. Now here's something a bit different. I'm going to talk about our main story tonight. For that reason, I think a change of logo might be in order. In case you're wondering, the key differences between this show and Last Week Tonight are that Last Week Tonight is funnier and has a higher budget, but the month's end is less likely to disappear forever for tax purposes. Obviously, that's mainly because this show is worth fuck all. If I could profit from making this show and never having to release it, I absolutely would. Before that, though, just a quick notification that this show is about to contain a trigger warning. So Ralph Fiennes and Matt Smith, if you're watching, look away now. Don't worry, though, I will do the trigger warning in a way that even most anti-trigger warning campaigners seem to find acceptable. Now on YouTube, it's back to the month's end with Mark Grimshaw, which contains strong language, adult themes, and discussion of anti-trans bigotry that some viewers may find upsetting. For our main story tonight, we're going to take a look back at this incident during Prime Minister's questions on February 7th.
It's a bit rich, Mr. Speaker, to hear about promises from someone who's broken every single promise he was elected on. I mean, I think I counted almost 30 in the last year. Pensions, planning, peerages, public sector pay, tuition fees, childcare, second referendums, defining a woman. Although in fairness, that was only 99% of a U-turn.
I do think it's worth taking a moment to properly acknowledge what Rishi actually said here. He was utilising the transphobic talking point of what is a woman, a question that gender-critical people use to try and delegitimise the identity of trans women, trans men and non-binary people. It was popularised by American far-right commentator Matt Walsh, who made a documentary with the same name. But let's get something clear here. Matt Walsh and other conservatives like him don't care about defining a woman because they want to protect women's rights. They care about defining a woman because they want to use biological essentialism to determine exactly whose reproductive rights and right to bodily autonomy they want to strip away. It's an inherently anti-woman question. There was a lot of pressure on Rishi to apologise after making the comment, so of course he sent out the big guns.
If you had listened as I did to what he said, he could not have been clearer in the respect he has for Brianna Gray's mother in the face of an
He
unspeakable
was
tragedy.
I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure the best way to demonstrate that you respect someone is to repeatedly get their surname wrong. And in fact, I think I'd be a hell of a lot more careful around mispronouncing surnames in general if I was Jeremy Hunt. There's been a lot of focus on zoning in on small amounts of respectability instead of looking at the bigger picture throughout the whole of this scandal. Like, for example, I'm not going to congratulate Rishi Sunak on correctly using she-her pronouns for Brianna Ghey, when in the same conversation he's continuing to push the exact anti-trans rhetoric that helped lead to her death. Of course, the most notable example of zoning on respectability instead of focusing on the bigger picture came in Keir Starmer's response to Rishi.
Of all the weeks to say that, when Brianna's mother is in this chamber, shame, parading as a man of integrity when he's got absolutely no responsibility. Absolute. Of all.
Now, before I react to this, I should probably make it clear what my opinions of Keir Starmer and the fundamentally minimal difference between him and Rishi Sunak are. What's the best way to put this? If I was in a trolley problem situation where Keir Starmer was tied to one track and Rishi Sunak was tied to the other, I'd probably ask the driver if he could reverse and have another go. Like, given the political climate at the moment, I should probably clarify that that isn't a threat towards them. It should be obvious that it isn't a threat because we don't live in a fucking cartoon. Apparently I have to clarify that it isn't a threat because MPs are currently using any criticism towards them to justify clamping down on peaceful protest, and I don't want this clip to appear on the news in a montage justifying why we're fascist now. So let's get into what Keir said here, because he received a lot of support for the way he dealt with Rishi's transphobia, and that was ludicrous to me because he didn't actually deal with Rishi's transphobia. He didn't ever say that what Rishi said was wrong and he was wrong to be transphobic. He said that Rishi was wrong to be transphobic specifically in front of the grieving mother of a trans child. His principles extended to, I can't believe you would say such a thing. In front of her. It clearly should have been behind her back, Rishi. Like, today of all days. Sorry, Keir, remind me which days you think it's acceptable to be transphobic, and I'm sure we can resolve this scheduling issue with Rishi. I think there's also quite a lot to be said for the fact that the only time Keir Starmer, and indeed the media, have felt the need to call out transphobia was to protect the feelings of a cis woman. Trans people have to repeatedly hear this kind of dehumanising language in the media and online every day, and there's something really quite sick about these institutions only putting on the facade of caring when it affects a cis person, especially when the victim of the rhetoric this language is pushing is the trans girl who was murdered. Of course, the reality is that Keir couldn't make a blanket statement that the transphobia itself was the problem, because if he did, he'd then have to actually do something to deal with the transphobic MPs in his own party. Sorry, surely I'm not the only person that was expecting a picture of Rosie Duffield to pop up then. What? Something wrong? So at this point, we've got a scandal where nobody is actually willing to call out what the actual problem was, which was explicitly transphobic rhetoric, and nobody's willing to discuss an actual solution to the increase of transphobia in society. So luckily, the media were there to actually call out the real issue in this situation. Phones. Yes, Brianna's mother, Esther Ghey, has started a campaign for under-16s to be banned from social media and for phone manufacturers to make special phones for that age group that block social media apps and include technology for parents to track what their children are using their phones for. Now look, I think this is a genuinely terrible idea that could put a lot of children, particularly LGBTQ plus kids, in real danger. I don't blame Esther for doing this campaign. I completely understand why someone in mourning in circumstances like herself would do whatever they can to try and make a difference to stop something like this ever happening again, no matter how misjudged or ill-advised that idea is. I do, however, completely blame the media for latching onto this campaign to desperately try to make the public forget the role that transphobia, stoked up by their own articles daily, played in Brianna's murder, and to attempt to wash the blood off their own hands. Let's quickly talk about why it's a bad idea. The plan to ban children from social media is an all-round bad idea because it cuts off such an important part of the way young people socialise these days. It will be particularly bad for LGBTQ plus children like Brianna, who go to social media to find community with people like them who might not be present in their real life. Indeed, I know some younger trans people who were friends with and connected with Brianna through social media, and it was a major support network for her. I also feel like a social media ban for teenagers completely ignores the real issue of how social media affects adults. Like right now over on Facebook, there's a 90% chance that your nan is getting radicalised into bigotry by a minion. Like, I don't know, I don't remember Bob saying that Islamists had taken over the country, but then I've also not seen Despicable Me 3, so maybe he did. I also doubt there's that many teenagers knocking about on the Mumsnet sex and gender forums, the 4chan for women who say live, laugh, love, and think drinking Prosecco is a personality trait. We talk about teenagers getting obsessed with social media while you've got middle-aged men like Graham Linehan choosing having a Twitter account over having a family. Oh, sorry, I did use the wrong name there. It is, of course, now called X. It's X family, not family. The reality is that stopping teenagers accessing social media isn't going to solve what the actual problem here was, which was the increasing societal acceptance of transphobia, which, as we know, was the motive of one of Brianna Shai's murderers. When you've got a Prime Minister normalising transphobic talking points in Parliament, an Equalities Minister who claims to meet with LGBTQ plus advocacy groups whilst only actually meeting with anti-trans hate groups like Transgender Trend and Sex Matters, a proliferation of comedy specials justifying transphobic hate speech, billionaire children's authors using their money to support fundraisers for legal cases attempting to change the Equality Act to reduce the rights trans people have, never-ending NHS waiting lists at gender clinics making it impossible for trans people to receive the basic standards of healthcare they deserve, transphobic media institutions celebrating the actions of murderers by giving them exactly what they fucking wanted, and frankly so much more that I simply don't have time to list because, in theory, this is supposed to be a comedy show. It's hard to pretend that access to social media is the singularity at fault here. We should probably also address why the idea of allowing parents to track what children are doing on their phone is a bad idea, and really just saying that children are people, not property, should be enough. They are entitled to a basic level of privacy. The truth is, for LGBTQ plus children, it could be particularly dangerous should their phone usage out them to potentially bigoted parents. Obviously, that doesn't need any further explanation, which is good for me because, again, in theory, comedy show. Instead, let's talk about how it'd be bad for every child. I was in high school over 10 years ago, and I still remember when I was 14, 15, the ages where you're going through puberty and we're discovering things about yourself, how many conversations boys in school would have about wanking and porn. Those people are all adults now, and I'm pretty fucking sure they still wouldn't want their parents seeing their internet search history from when they were 14. And in fact, I'm pretty sure those parents probably also don't want to know either what was being looked at or the frequency at which it was being looked at. But there is the completely valid argument to say that parents should have some awareness of what adult content like that the children are viewing, so they can make sure that they're staying safe and so they can stay properly educated about things like consent. That's exactly why the conversations about ideas like this tend to focus on murky subjects like porn, rather than, say, the embarrassment of your parents reading all your messages to your first crushes, following the ins and outs of what's going on in your friendship groups, like it's a really badly plotted episode of EastEnders, or a really well-plotted episode of Hollyoaks. Questioning why you've spent so long playing Nev's Jambusters. Maybe that was just me who spent my entire childhood doing that. I don't know. Again, there's legitimate discussions to be had about what children use their phones for and how best to keep them safe, but completely stripping them of any privacy in their life is not the answer. So what is the actual answer to resolve what we discussed today? Well, it's simple. To try and remove transphobia from society. For politicians and the media to stop inflaming the culture war, to stop the level of dehumanising of trans people that is allowing this bigotry to flourish, to take action against the online anti-trans radicalisation that is having very dangerous real-world impacts. And we need to do something now before it's left to the next grieving family to pick up the pieces. I think I've said enough there. I think it's now time to stop listening to me and go and actually listen to trans people. That's the show. I've been Mark Grimshaw. Join me next month for more Month End.